should be starting to record now.
Recording is on.
Today it's July the 21st, and this is an Extinctionati meeting number 60, I can't remember exactly which one. But we have special guest today, Joe Allen. And Joe Allen is a blogger. I just came across...
No. A blogger would be like a digital bulimic, wouldn't it? Always blogging.
Okay. So a writer.
I think a writer would be much more appropriate. Thank you.
Okay, a writer, and a very good writer, by the way. And it basically I got from your website. It was writes about ethnic identity, transhuman hubris, and the eternal spiritual quest. And yeah, so the articles that I came across were all transhumanist ones, and they're all kind of golden. Why we are really excited to talk to you is because you think the same way about as we do about transhumanism, and we're thinking of ways to basically counter it, to try and rebel against it. And so that's what we wanted to. But welcome.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome, Joe. My name is Sophie.
Hello, Sophie. Very good to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
So, am I to take it?
I'm Hugh and Michael.
And Michael is on the phone.
I'm Hugh and Mike is on mute, probably at work.
So, Hugh, am I to take it that you are an expatriate out on a ship somewhere in the Mediterranean?
Yeah, I seastead. So, but it's kind of my prepping strategy. I'm a little bit of a doomer, and so I thought, I come from tech. I'm basically a recovering engineer, and I just decided I can't take corporate America anymore. If I spend another moment in it, I'll die. So I figured that connectivity is just getting good enough that you can go to sea and sail around the world and just be able to, keep a job for about 6 months before they get pissed off. Actually, I kept my job for about 2.5 years before they got so pissed off and axed me. But it was just the right time to start. As I sailed around Europe and the Med and stuff. And for example, I just came to Spain when they were switching from 3G to 4G, so I could just do conferences like this and hold down a tech job with difficulty. But yeah, unfortunately, I had a director in front of me that was a Russian guy, and he was terribly resentful. He was relocated from St. Petersburg to a satellite office in Wales, and his ambition was to get to the headquarters in Texas. But because he was Russian, he couldn't get a visa, and he absolutely hated it. And he hated the fact that I was swanning around on a boat and stuff, and it just eventually did his head in. So he took the first chance he could get to lay me off. But anyway, that's me on a boat.
and Sophie, if I may ask, where are you coming from?
I'm a recovering doctor, specializing in women's health. I'm in Ireland, from French origin. I'm in the west of Ireland. I'm a gardener. I'm self-sufficient, and I do a lot of different things. So there you go. That's my background, really.
That sounds wonderful.
You're welcome.
And Mike?
I
don't think Mike can talk, but Mike's in LA. Yeah.
Mike's in LA.
Yeah. So there are a small group of us. The others on Australia and stuff, and it's like 3 a.m. So it's this is not a good time for them. But yeah. So let's talk about transhumanism, and have you thought about countering it? Is rebelling against it? What can we, the little folks, do?
Non-participation, I would say, is the first step. All of us have our limits as to how much invasive technology we're willing to take on. I mean, obviously, I'm coming to you on the internet and using all of the same sorts of technologies that any average person would use. But I think that the last 10 years, maybe 20, has seen just an absolute shift in the way that culture functions, in the way that children are raised, in the way that the elderly are cared for. Every facet of our lives has been in some way deeply impacted by all of these technologies, many of them invasive. So to me, it's really a matter of where you draw the line, and non-participation in anything that goes against your core values is the number one step as far as resistance goes. As far as active rebellion, I'm not so sure that there's anything to rebel against quite yet. I don't see, outside of vaccine, de facto vaccine mandates, anything that is being forced on us. But I don't think that that's going to last very long. And just like with the de facto vaccine mandates, we're basically required to cultivate some sort of digital persona in order to exist in society. And as that trend continues, you could say that to be a non-participant is in effect rebellion. But at the moment, the answer to the answer to anyone's desire to drop out of the system and not participate is just simply, okay, good luck. So no one has put us in a cage yet, at least not here. China, obviously, that's very different, and in a number of other countries, it's very different. But in America, in Europe, by and large, in most of South America, and across the world, really, none of us are having our arms twisted too hard to be here. We've just been enticed to be here.
Yeah, so my thinking is that it won't last much longer, that we're going to be forced in. This kind of the same way as we're forced into vaccinations. It's not legally, it's just they make it functionally impossible to exist in the modern world unless you participate. And so you've come across Allison McDowell, have you?
No, the name seems familiar, but it's possible that it was from an email that you had sent me. No, say more.
Okay. Yeah, so Allison McDowell is a really interesting case, and I highly recommend looking at her videos and stuff, because she's really a kind of ordinary soccer mom kind of thing, but she's an educator. And she came across the Great Reset and all this horrible dystopia that's coming down the line from, like, the Fourth Industrial Revolution and Klaus Schwab's dystopian vision. And it kind of descended on her because she had to start doing these things, like these kind of play tables for kindergarten kids, where they're doing basically impact analysis and impact funding. They're using impact tokens, so they sell tokens on the blockchain to these companies like BlackRock and State Street, all these big hedge funds. They're investing in social responsibility, and so the way it works is they show something like, well, you can stop if you intervene early with little kids, you can stop them, becoming drug addicts. If they become drug addicts, it costs the state N, and therefore, based on metrics, we corrected that behavior. Therefore, the state owes us some portion of N, right? So it's preventive stuff mainly, and then it's for all aspects of social good. It's almost like carbon tax or something like that, but it's creeping in everywhere, and it's coming.
Sure.
But it's a tsunami, and so you can't really escape it, because it's very much like that 1000K thing. The welcome leap thing that you
Yes.
Did you do that article? You did that article.
I did.
Right?
I wasn't,
Yeah.
it's more than I mentioned it. Obviously, the person who did the real legwork on that is Whitney Webb. She's quite wonderful as a writer if you've never read her.
So Allison McDowell is a kind of a Whitney Webb. And when she found this stuff out, she started looking deeper and started doing videos on YouTube, and getting a little group together. She doesn't really want to interact with us because she thinks we're too we're not too hippie enough. She wants to basically her response to this is like, well, I offer peace and dandelions. And I'm kind of thinking like, no, the way I see it, this is like Hitler just marched into Poland. I think I want to do something a little more practical than dandelions here, like maybe fight back. And so she's very good from the point of view of she's just discovering all of this, and she lays it out very nicely. She's quite a good academic. She's quite a good SWAT. So, but yeah, I think her approach needs to mature, or her response needs to mature. But anyway, she's very interesting from that point of view. So, look her up.
One of the things that I think we run into, anyone who sees the writing on the wall and sees all of these powerful and influential people and organizations who have really big plans for us, and those of us who want nothing to do or very little to do with those plans. One of the things we run into is the Kazinsky quandary, I guess you would say, that you come to a point where you realize that society is moving in a direction that you're not comfortable with, or you just completely revolt against. You run out of options as to how to deal with it. You begin to sound more and more insane, and are probably going insane. And before long, you're viewed as a potential Kazinsky, right? Now, if you've read the Unabomber Manifesto, or what is it, the Industrial Society in its future?
The anti-tech.
Well, anti-tech, the why and the how is really interesting, yeah. And he's got a recent one out, which is also interesting.
Yeah, I've got it. I haven't started it yet. I'm interested to read it. But I guess what I mean is that, Kazinsky in his early writing was extremely lucid. But the problem, obviously, is that he snapped and wanted to, spark some sort of violent uprising against the system, or at least contribute his own part to a violent uprising. Now, the minute you start going in that direction, or you're even targeted as someone who's going in that direction, I mean, you're done, right? I mean, you're not going to accomplish anything by physically attacking the people who are behind this. You're nobody, and even if you were somebody, what have you really accomplished? All you've done is pretty much validated their point of view by not being able to debate it. The first thing in my mind is to avoid the Kazinsky quandary. Just avoid it completely. Try to sound as sane as possible, which for someone like me is somewhat difficult, but I do my best. From there, you're talking about an open public debate, and it is an open public debate to the extent that we are allowed to debate these things. But again, a problem that I think all of us run into is the moment you mention something like the Great Reset, not unlike after 9/11 when you started talking about the NSA or something like that. People who aren't already aware of these systems and aren't already aware of the organizations and the individuals who are pushing these systems, they immediately are triggered into this suspicion as to whether or not you yourself are a lunatic, right? Because they don't know about it. They're arrogant. They're so arrogant, they think that if they don't know about it, it must not be true. And so I think that for me as a writer, the number one thing is to bring some sort of awareness as to what these predominant cultural trends are to people, and hopefully encourage some sort of debate over whether or not the sorts of lifestyles that are being planned for us, the sorts of cultures that are being planned for us, and in particular, the amount of cultural destruction that is being planned for us is something that they want. I don't know that it's really, that we've hit a tipping point that it's too late to turn back from, but undoubtedly the COVID-19 pandemic and the response with the lockdowns and the total digitalization of every aspect of our lives that's celebrated by Klaus Schwab and many others, that's something that I personally want nothing to do with. I mean, these guys are fucking maniacs as far as I'm concerned. Brilliant, lucid, well-informed. I think that they have, in many ways, a beautiful vision of the world. It's just that I don't want a fucking thing to do with it, right? So,
psychopathic.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we're faced with you see, we're trying to be lucid and sane, but we are faced with people who are lucid and psychopathic, meaning no empathy and meaning not at all like we are. They're functioning in another realm. So I know that the Kazinsky trap has to be treaded on very carefully. And even though he's very inspiring and sometimes it's tempting to people like me even to, but we have to, we went into that problem with Allison when we talked to her about what's her form of activism. And she was not presenting a strategy that was matching the enemy that we are facing. And, we're facing people who have absolutely no problem in eliminating enemies. I mean, they have no problem in erasing people, erasing identity, erasing culture, erasing social structures. So I think it would be interesting to debate on the form of activism. And I would be curious to see what you see apart from raising awareness.
Well, again, so number one, non-participation to the extent that you're able to and still survive in the current climate. Number two, raising awareness and trying to have some sort of public debate, even if it's on the fringes and makes its way towards the center, some sort of public debate as to whether or not a transhumanist lifestyle or just a completely technocratic lifestyle is something you want for yourself, and then more importantly, what you would want for your kids, or if you have no children and enough empathy to imagine future generations being worth something, future generations, is this the model by which you want these people to grow? So beyond that, there's only direct confrontation, right? Now, we've seen already some direct confrontation with Davos. It's it's been anywhere from activists who simply see them as elitists and globalists who gather together, much like with the WTO protests in Seattle, right? Anarchist types, or maybe the same sort of hippy dippy types. But then you also have the Alex Jones types, right? I mean, he stood there in front of the lines of cars coming in to the Bilderberger meeting with a bullhorn. It's like, I see you, I know you, so Hillary Clinton, whoever. It was a double-edged sword in that it did. I mean, the public had no idea who the Bilderbergers were before Alex Jones, and Davos has been a bit more on the radar, but I don't think many people are aware of it outside of kind of a lunatic fringe pointing it out. But when you talk about resistance, and especially you talk about confronting people like this, are you going to show up in Davos, in Switzerland, and stand with signs saying, I want to be a human, not a robot? That's not going to work. You're never going to get a face-to-face, debate out of Klaus Schwab or Yuval Noah Harari or any of these other cats. They're in a completely different realm, and it really shows in their viewpoint in regards to the wider populace. But what you can do, I at the moment hope, is spread awareness of this encroaching lifestyle in a way that it wasn't done with the smartphone. People tried it. Nicholas Carr tried it, right? Derek Jensen tried it. He tried to spread awareness of this kind of creeping social structure that people were being enticed into adopting. It wasn't enough then. It may not be enough now. But I don't see many other options, because direct confrontation isn't enough. It ends up making you look like a clown. And it ends up basically delegitimizing all of the people who are trying their best to maintain some sort of alternative, which the alternative obviously is, the lifestyle that nature has evolved over the last 150,000 years, or at least the last 10. So,
and what about sabotage? What about sabotage?
So hang on.
It's a legitimate.
No, listen, it's a legitimate. A non-violent.
It's a legitimate question. It's a legitimate question. But what I what I would say to that is look at the way Earth First operated, right? And look at the attempts at sabotage that they made again and again and again. You know, spikes in trees and destroying equipment and occasionally
The
attacking loggers.
weathermen and stuff. Yeah, the
Sorry?
weathermen and stuff are just didn't
And
the
the weathermen
weathermen
especially.
and stuff. It just didn't show.
So it seems like a good idea, I suppose, if you are completely detached from the consequences and you're completely uninterested in the ultimate consequences and simply want to, express this frustration. It makes total sense. The problem is, again, it's insane. It won't work. It's you're beating your head against the wall, more than likely to end up in some fucking prison cell somewhere. And even if you get away with whatever sort of sabotage that you got planned, you've done nothing to legitimate the movement against these forces that are coming down on us. The only way a sabotage works is if the machine breaks. There's simply no logical way for citizens to sabotage a machine as enormous as this. I don't even think that there's any possibility of stopping this machine. I think the machine will continue to roll on for decades or centuries until the power runs out. But what there is from my perspective, what there is the possibility of doing is setting up cultural barriers to cultivate and continue to cultivate the sorts of naturalist lifestyles that have always nurtured human beings up to this point. And it's perhaps I am offering a dandelion to the lions, but I simply don't.
You are, but I have the solution.
Okay.
So you are offering dandelions. I have the solution. So let me go from the top. Now I don't think it's possible to drop out. I learned that from South Africa because after the black people were defeated in colonial times, after the Battle of Blood River in the 19th century, the black people went off. They just went off and did subsistence farming. They said, okay, screw you. They didn't participate in white man's money because they knew it was a trick, just dead slavery. And so they just went off into their hats, sat in the sun, did subsistence farming. That was a threat to the system. So what happened was they needed the labor because they found gold and they needed people to go down the mines. So all they did was just force black people off the land and into the mines. And the way you do it is easy. You just do dog taxes and poll taxes and roof taxes, and you just force people back into the system. And that's what they'll do. You see with Allison McDowell stuff is they'll get you from the kids. If you have kids, they will have a million things that you have to comply with. And to do that will imply vaccinations, conformance with all these, things like having a cell phone on. You have your digital shackles. Basically, they will fit you into these programs. And increasingly, what's going to happen is things like UBI. Now, UBI, a lot of people, and me too, until I got wise to what was really happening, was I thought, oh, UBI is going to be great. UBI comes along, we can do activism all day, and this is going to be. Say, no, you won't. They'll give you a UBI, and it's all basically the spending is. They basically do nudges, so they do personal improvement plans. So if you're an activist, they'll say you have a low social credit score, and they'll give you a personal action plan, and that'll say, well, you can, it'll be everything from. You see, everything is included: education, health, well-being, and stuff. So they will say, okay, if you're an activist. You've got a psychological problem, so you need to go to psychotherapy, and then part of your UBI will be for psychotherapeutic meds. Then they'll say, okay, well, you've got diabetes, and part of your thing, they'll give you a little nudge so that if you spend money on pizza, you won't be able to use your UBI to do that. It'll have to be healthy foods. So they control your life in micro detail, and they do it through social programs in the UBI. So it is a direct threat to the system if you try and drop out and do a parallel polis. So there's no hope of doing that. There's zero hope of avoiding these things. And even to the extent that some people in France some anarchists tried to drop out and do a parallel, and they flagged them instantly as eco-terrorists. And the thing that triggered it was that they stopped using cell phones. As soon as the group stopped using cell phones, they started surveilling them intensely and infiltrating them because they thought, okay, now they've gone radical. So you can't, those options are not open. So, but there is an option, and you've been hedging around it all the time in certain words. You say, we have to build cultural barriers and stuff like that. Well, yes. So, hey, I want to say something, just lead in here to try and get here dramatically. Is in this article you mentioned Harari, this one about the future of basically false religion, and basically how these transhumanists are going to try and use transcranial stimulation and stuff as a substitute for God and religion.
Yep.
Okay, so the bit that I just want to read out here is Harari's thing, where he says they will spend more and more time playing virtual reality games. This is like what you wrote when asked about the prospect of what the useless class will do after robots take our jobs, and they're on UBI and then control micro level. The historian Yuval Noah Harari quipped, they will spend more and more time playing virtual reality games. It will give them much more excitement and emotional engagement than anything in the real world outside. You could say that for thousands of years already, millions of people have found meaning in playing virtual reality games. We just call those games religions. Okay, so here, are you ready, drum roll? Are you ready for the solution to this whole problem? The solution is, an alternate reality. You're saying build a cultural barriers that say they giving us a very shitty dystopian reality, and it is an alternate reality. We just come up with another alternate reality. It's not a breakaway reality. It's not a parallel polis where we reject their stuff. We embrace their stuff. We go into the matrix. We do all this digital stuff, and we make them regret that we did it. Because, you see, it's all a question of just getting a better narrative. So if it's an alternate reality, then you do these things called alternate reality games. So I came to this conclusion. I saw all of this coming in 2012. I stumbled on the concept of alternate reality gaming. Have you ever heard of this concept?
Actually, yes, but until I read the first part of the document that you'd sent me, and I found the ideas to be extraordinarily. How do I put it? Obviously, your creativity is on point. The whole notion of creating a sort of digital egregore is fantastic. Before I go on, let's just I'll go ahead and say that I am extraordinarily skeptical of any resistance to technocracy that involves adopting, an immersive technological reality or culture. But at the same time, I couldn't help but be impressed with the absolute creativity of it all. So I can see how much of an artistic outlet the digital medium is, and that's undeniable. Anyway, that was my first impression. But please go on.
Oh, so all of that and the artwork and stuff is just a tool. Here's the secret: that underneath it all, what you're really creating is a cult. So, you say you need a counterculture and cultural barriers. Well, it is in the word cult. That's the secret, is right.
Sure.
There. So,
cult is short
most
for
people
culture,
get completely freaked out if you say cult. Yeah, it comes from the Proto-Indo-European quell, which means the center of a wheel, the hub of a wheel, or the center of a drain, or kind of center of a black hole. It means like the swirling rounded drain, because you normally have a charismatic leader, and then he draws people into his orbit, and so it's kind of like that orbital system. But anything to do with cult is based on that idea. So okay, so now most people get a bit freaked out about cults, and here's the thing: is A, you can have a benign cult, and B, there's a certain idea that more and more people are getting, and I'm trying to convince people of, and that's you can have a cult and you tell people it's a cult. So it kind of inoculates it. It's kind of basically saying, It's kind of like having a placebo, and you tell people that it's a placebo, and you get this placebo effect. It still works, even though it's kind of benign. So the idea then is that you just build up a movement, and you think later what to do with it. If later you want to go, with Uncle Ted or whatever, but the opportunity will present itself later, particularly, when the state responds. If the state does something, and Charles Schwab and all of these guys do something really egregious, like, for example, they go to war, or they try and do a draft, or, something that really outrages the public, but they're all in lockdown, then immediately you can start all of this. You can, put the thing into action. I struggled for many years to explain this concept to people, but then, QAnon came along and stole my thunder. They did it in 2 years. They stormed the Capitol. And exactly what you can do. I'm not saying you storm the Capitol, but it shows you that once you set up that cult and that mindset with a group of members, it can become like the Falun Gong, or it can spread all over the world, and you just keep on developing the mindset. So you don't debate people. You see, as a writer, you're probably thinking of, opening up the debate. Well, I can tell you, no one wants to have this debate. These guys are already bought. They love this shit. I mean, I'll give you an example. There's a German friend of mine who's got a boat here. He had a young guy from Germany, kind of 15 or something, that came out on his boat, had a wonderful boating experience. And he said he didn't like it. He's not going to go boating again. And the guy asked him why. And he said, well, boating's dangerous, which is true. And he says, if I want to go on a boat and have a boating experience, I can do this when, sorry, this guy coming a bit too close to me. I might have to just break off and go and tell them to fuck off. Okay, I'll just watch it. Anyway, so the guy said, look, I don't like boating. It's not real. I can have the same experience on a boat in virtual reality, and no danger. And so my friend was horrified. He said, the danger is real, but you're actually doing something. The reward is, if you sail around the world in virtual reality and you tell people, I'm around the world sailor, and, Microsoft sailing or something, it's like you haven't done anything. You haven't risked anything. But if you sail around the world on a real boat in reality, well, that's something. And the guy couldn't get the concept of reality versus virtual reality and the safety of virtual reality. So Gen last is already lost. So I think the only way you can get it then is you go into the matrix, into this virtual reality, and you bring them out. You basically say, hey, let's play a game. And they get into the game, and they get loyalty to the movement, and then the movement brings them back to reality. In effect, we're just talking them down from a bad drug trip, if you see what I mean.
Again, the concept is fantastic, and I certainly have no criticism of it, but I have you've experienced virtual reality, I'm sure. Yes.
Yeah, I hate it because it's kind of this dead shit. Yeah. I used to program virtual reality stuff.
Alternate reality, which means that you, as Hugh was explaining, you're bringing people back into the real world where they interact with real humans, and in real outdoor settings, even in nature. It's not something that is something to as Hugh was saying, it's like taking a drug addict off his drug.
Right. Yeah, going into the you're kind of going in and putting the needle to your arm to show that you're cool, and then pulling them back. No, I get it. No, it's actually it's a fantastic and utterly it's a wild concept, right? So for me, I don't plan on spending any more time on a computer than I absolutely have to, which at the moment, given my position, is quite a bit, but that's certainly not the long-term plan. For you, I'm all about it, man. Go get them. I'm reminded. I'm reminded of though, like Gab, for instance, right? Or these sorts of alternative platforms that, if you've ever spent any time on Gab, you know that there's a lot of really intelligent people on there. There's a lot of interesting conversations, but because it's unregulated, and especially because it attracts the sort of dissident mindset, it's just a web work of lunacy as well, right? Like it's both. Not that Twitter is necessarily that much better, but it's just say that the more unhinged personalities tend towards Gab than these alternative platforms. In the same way, I question how much impact that's having on the larger system. I mean, it's creating an alternative system to what Twitter and the kind of hegemony of the Silicon Valley types have created. It's definitely created an alternative. I'm not convinced, though, that it won't fall into all the same traps that the original models that these alternative platforms are intending to rebel against, that they won't just become an alternate reality version of that same thing. Now, you've only just introduced this concept to me, and I certainly am not trying to say that I'm not trying to critique your idea on that, but I am reminded of that these ideas of creating alternatives that closely mirror the system that you're trying to rebel against, it doesn't ever seem to work out well in the end. At the same time, though, I mean, what you're talking about, it does intrigue me, this notion of going into the gaming industry, so to speak, or the gaming world, creating a universe.
Wait, that's common mistake. Common mistake.
Okay.
This is not about gaming. This is not about online gaming. People get confused because occasionally ARGs do an online game, but they just what's called rabbit holes. Or trailheads, or rabbit holes, and they just trailheads to lead people into the game. So it's basically just a way of going and getting tech heads and stuff. So you do a game, but it generally leads into the real world. And that's what the ARG is about, is leading people into the real world with flesh and blood people and real trees and real forests and real growing programs and stuff. But you see, you do it on the basis of it's a scavenger hunt and it's a treasure hunt and stuff like that. So it also
sounds like the Merry Pranksters to me a lot.
Yeah, so the guys that really, really understand this are the guys that I mentioned in that doc, the Institute, and Jeff Hull, Spencer McCall. We just did an interview with Spencer McCall yesterday, and it was I really like talking to those guys. They just did this thing called In Bright Axiom, and the Latitude Society. And the Latitude Society is a cult that's not a cult. They completely get the idea. And they're doing, I got this idea that I'm talking about from them. So it is designed to, so you go to Mendocino and you go and meet real people around a campfire, and it's a cover for getting back to the real world without, but you have all these trailheads in the blog space, in the online space. But I mean, I hate being online. I hate social media, and I would love to get away from it. But I have no illusions that you can't just drop out and do a vegetable garden, otherwise they'll come and get you. I mean, I'm on a boat and stuff, and
hang on a second. Hang on a second. I know lots of people who have dropped out and grown vegetable gardens, and so far as I know, they're not under surveillance by any intelligence agencies or any other authorities. I'm
not
curious.
Not yet. It's coming. It's coming. Yeah. You see, this is why you must have a look at Allison McDowell and stuff. You see, there's so few people that really get it. What's coming? There's why. I
mean, listen. I'm completely. I've certainly fantasized and terrified myself with the concept, and I'm under no illusions that it's not possible. But I guess what I'm saying is that that's certainly not the case at the moment. I mean, there are tons and tons of people who are choosing to opt out. Not as many as I would like, And certainly they're not as closely allied with each other, and they don't necessarily see themselves as part of a resistance so much as just making personal choices. But yeah, I mean, going off the
Yeah,
grid, that's an American tradition, brother.
Yeah. No. You see, it's days ending. See, there's the whole eco movement and the eco village movement and stuff, and everybody goes and does these, kind of training for an eco village and stuff. It was all a scam. It was all a commercial scam. I know. I have a friend who was a director of one of these big things in Ecuador, and they get all the kids and they teach them how to do sustainable living and stuff. And it's all horseshit, basically. And she admitted it eventually, that saying that, if the grid ever goes down, they won't survive any longer than anybody else, because as soon as the solar panels and batteries run out, they're screwed.
Again, look, I'm not talking about. I'm not talking about people going off the grid to the point that they're living by themselves with nothing but a solar cell and a bean patch. I mean people who just simply have done, and you see this all over rural America. It's being eroded, which is one of the reasons that I've decided to completely restructure my life around, putting forward the research that I've been doing on this for, the last 2.5 decades. But
I gotta just keep talking. I gotta go yell at these guys. Sorry, hang on.
I'll wait till you get back. I'll tell you what. If I'll speak with your other guest for a while. She's quite charming.
Yeah, thank you. But you see, I'm actually a dropout. I left the city for living on an island off the coast of Ireland, and when I was young, and bring up my children and grow my veg, and went back to work a little bit in the medical system, but never trusted it, so always kept growing my food, and I've been gravitating around these eco projects off grid, and I know a lot of those things. I've been to a lot of, and at the end of the day, I have been woken up to the true reality that, as Hugh was saying, they are extremely vulnerable, because I started I started to see that in a case of war, in a case of, and which is one of the scenarios that could happen, certainly there's a good probability for that, but all sorts of other scenarios, all those off grids, all those people who want to live like that are going to be their existence is going to be compromised anyway. So I don't think it is a long-term way of activism. And I returned to another type. I'm exploring other options, even though I'm still growing my veg, But yeah.
So anyway, the counterculture movement and is just repeating history. So it really makes me want to slit my wrists. All these people just repeating in a very milquetoast and watered down way what happened in the 70s. So there's a great thing about Adam Curtis, if you've ever seen him. He's a documentary maker from the BBC, and he's very insightful, and he covered all of this. And
is he the one that did that movie Hyper-Normalization?
Yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about.
He's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, and he had the geodesic domes and Buckminster Fuller, and everybody went did Buckminster Fuller, and it all turned to crap. And he goes over the same ideals. So it's like when I see these guys, recreating all of this and saying, "Oh, we're going to drop out," and say, "A, you're not going to drop out. B, climate change is going to get you." And C, everybody's done it before, and all they do is they recreate the same old shit. So it's like it's absolutely doomed. Everybody's done. They're just regurgitating something out of ignorance that didn't work in the 70s. So it's like, I think as part of the things we need to wean people off this idea is that, we're all in now. Basically, there's no escape. There's no damned escape from this. This thing is all encompassing. What these guys intend to do with the micromanagement of us and kind of like everything is like e-education, e-social philanthropy, e-everything. And that E implies that we, e-currency and stuff means that we will be controlled to, like little toddlers. In fact, we'll be regimented like we're in an army. So these won't be an option.
So to the extent that is certainly at least implicit in a lot of the discussions and writings that come out of the World Economic Forum, and a lot of especially the leaked or unintentionally released documents that come out of Silicon Valley. But one of the more gripping, right, was the selfish ledger. I mean, it wasn't an official document, but I think it really encapsulated the way in which a digital technocracy fits into the concept of cultural evolution as a validation for its existence, as being some sort of higher being that we should all aspire to. Anyway, as you read it, you do see this totalitarian edge. I don't think anybody at the World Economic Forum has said we seek to dominate the planet with our ideas, though they do edge pretty close to it. But it's implicit in a lot of their ideas. There's this kind of universalist impulse in their ideas. But, you know, they haven't been able to realize it yet. It's not even close to the level of cohesion and totality that they seem to intend, or at least I suspect that they intend. So the nightmarish dystopic doomsday scenario is one that, you know, my imagination tends towards, but my imagination is going to pan out as it's envisioned in my mind, right? It almost never does. I'm surprised constantly. So whatever my projections for the future are, I trust them to the extent that I trust that I know what's going to be around the next bend in the road, especially if I don't know where I'm going, that the road's not going to drop off in front of me. But, you know, these dystopic imaginations of the future, I simply, by and large, I embrace them and am skeptical of them simultaneously, and probably for that reason, right? Because I tend towards a sort of dystopic, paranoid sort of mentality. Yeah, I was raised in the South in the middle of nowhere. It's just how we are. But I also understand that it can be of great value. I haven't let it go. But it doesn't necessarily represent reality as it is in its totality, and it certainly doesn't represent reality as it's going to be in its totality. You don't have to go very far outside of your boat, and I'm sure you wouldn't have to go too far outside of your garden around the islands of Ireland to find all sorts of people out in nature doing what is natural to human beings. People have not stopped doing that, right? That's something that I constantly remind myself. No matter how grim this sort of technocratic imagery is that's coming out of Silicon Valley, that's coming out of the CCP, that's coming out of the World Economic Forum, no matter how grim that is, I don't think most people live that way yet. And I certainly don't think most people want to live that way. And so I guess what I'm saying is that I'm simply not so dismal. I think this was definitely smart to prepare for the worst, because the worst tends to come around the corner pretty frequently. But I certainly haven't lost hope to the point that you know, for instance, that even just the notion of sabotage, aside from its unrealistic premises, that's even a desire. There's not. This machine represents, as the people who constructed it say that it does, this machine represents the culmination of generations. You could argue millennia of dreams that human beings have had to elevate themselves to godhood and to control themselves, to control society, and to control the environment. This is nothing new. It's the rapidity of the technological element that's new. And it's completely disorienting. And it's absolutely terrifying as to what could happen, just like it was terrifying in the 50s and 60s as to what could happen if nuclear war broke out. But in the same way that nuclear war hasn't yet broken out, not to say that it won't, but we have literally spent, you know, there are decades of people before me, before I was born, who lived under the constant specter of nuclear war, and they watched the Twilight Zone, and they went through the drills, and they knew that there was a fallout shelter below their school. It didn't happen. And it didn't happen because that specter was held above the public imagination to the point that not only the public, but the leaders who are in charge of these weapon systems have thus far chosen not to rain that terror down upon us. Now, you take that and you compare it to these technocratic dreams of absolute control and total digitalization of every element of human life and perhaps even of natural life. I think that the reason it's gotten so much traction at present is just simply that people are not aware of how possible it is, and they're not aware of how detached the people who plan on implementing these things are from the regular populace. I am fairly certain that if the public was aware of this, there would be massive outrage. And I'm pretty hopeful that to the extent that the public can be made aware of these plans that are being made for us, that it won't necessarily require any sort of violent uprising or any other shit like that. It rarely have social movements succeeded in that regard, at least long term. They always tend to become the thing that they're fighting against. Again, I'm not saying that in regards to the alternate reality gaming. I'm still actually quite enamored with the notion. But
the elephant
in
the room,
is
the environment crisis.
So just one thing.
Sorry, but I mean, if you want to bring
may I? So just to respond to you, I think I agree totally with what you're saying. In terms of how bad it can get, it can't get, the way I imagine it is kind of like it can't get any worse than China is today. So I don't think, or certainly no worse than like North Korea, but it's probably some, if we go to war or something like that, it would be somewhere like the Stasi and East Germany. But I think where you're wrong is that people will want it. You see, like if you look in China today, people actually like social credit scoring. People, I think it'll be 50-50, and they're kind of plan it that way. So that the vast majority of people want to be sheep. They want to be regimented. They like the fact that they don't have to think. And it's like being in the army. Most people in the army, as I discovered, was they like the fact that everything's clear cut. The deal is simple. You just obey the rules, do your job, and you get fed. They all know that you might get sent over the top to be cannon fodder one day, but it's a very distant reality. And on the whole, it's very clearly defined what the rules are, the barriers, and it's very easy to conform to them. And then it's great. You don't have to make any choices. You don't get any anxiety about making decisions. You have them done for you, and you trust that the commanders will basically make the right decisions. And then most people will go for that deal. The reason why it doesn't work now is because of the macro picture. So one of the things that's implied in the Great Reset is they're preparing for climate change. It's not really explicit in what they do. They mention it now and again, but the climate change is a lot more
I would say
advanced
that the World Economic Forum in general, like the central thrust of most of their publications at this point is in some way related to climate change. So I would say it's very explicit.
Oh yeah, okay, but they're not sharing the details. They're not sharing how imminent it is, and they're not sharing the catastrophic climate change. They're still perpetuating this kind of myth that it's gradual, and we could always turn it back. They never mention tipping points or how close we are to them. They never mention all these catastrophic things that just don't fit with this nice smooth narrative. So it's all like nice smooth graphs, and you extrapolate the graph forward. There's nothing systemic, social, or technological. Well, there's a technological tipping point. Yeah, they talk about that a lot. But the thing about what's implied, and they're not really fessing up to, is geoengineering. Now, the way I see it is what's very likely to happen is they will implement geoengineering, and it will work. And that'll be the problem, because it's hubris squared. It's kind of an all-in bet on us managing the weather. And I think the worst thing you could possibly do for us is to give all the global leaders a global thermostat that they can fight over. So it's very soon you'll get from saving the planet to having, enhancing, say, crop production or something like that. But what they're going to do if geoengineering works is they're going to take any caps off greenhouse gas emissions or any kind of caps on growth. And then, so when they screw it up and geoengineering doesn't, they can't do it for some reason, like they're having a war or they're busy or they have an economic collapse or some reason why they can't do it for a month or two, then the effect of like 1,800 parts per million CO2 is going to basically devastate us. So you can see it's basically Icarus flying too close to the sun. And I think that the worst thing in the world, it's control of everything. And if you give them control of the weather, I think we're screwed. And so it's very insidious because most people are going to like it. They're going to welcome it.
So if that's the case, if you're correct and that, most people are sheep, which is, it doesn't take many trips around the block to find some evidence for that, though I don't necessarily believe that that's the case. But if it's true that most people want technocracy, that most people want communism, that most people want predatory capitalism, whatever the totalizing system may be, I don't really see much else that can be done. If that's what most people want, and I don't want it, I'm not going to impose my desire on them, right? Like the whole problem that I have with the system as it exists at present is that the desires of a small number of people are being imposed on me and many others like me who have no desire to take part in it. The only thing I want to do, I don't want to stop these techno innovators from trying to create God in a computer. I don't think that's going to happen. I think that they're going to keep trying, and I think that they'll produce something like a godlike machine. I don't think that it will be worth listening to on every problem. And I think that's probably the biggest problem, is that people already rely on artificial intelligence algorithms to make critical decisions that would be better done by human beings. But all in all, what I'm saying is that these trends are happening on the force of centuries of cultural evolution. And they're not going to stop because I'm waving a sign saying I don't like robots. I'm tempted to do so, but it's no better than Alex Jones screaming at a bullhorn at the Bilderbergers.
May I? When you finish,
please.
sorry.
Well, I guess ultimately what I mean to say is that it's an enormous world with plenty of room for plenty of types of people. The biggest problem that people have is that when different types of cultures butt up against each other, there's a tremendous amount of friction, and especially when one culture is far more powerful than the other and begins to impose itself on the other culture. Native Americans being a prime example. I don't want to end up like the Native Americans, but those motherfuckers fought tooth and nail to the end, and look where it got them. So whatever solution there is to the present technocratic trends coming out of the most elite institutions in the West and also in China and Japan, I don't think it's going to involve taking up arms. I don't think it's necessarily going to involve making a lot of noise like the 60s radicals did with their protest movements. I certainly don't have a clear image of the solution at present, or at least the clear images I have, I don't have enough confidence in to argue for. But I do think that, as you say, if people want this, if people want to become cyborgs, if this is the life they want to lead, there's really not much to do but try to escape or just grit your teeth and bear it, because that's what's going to happen. That's the reality. I don't think it's a necessary reality. I don't necessarily think that's what's going to happen. But if it's true that people desire this en masse, then that's just the way it is. I hold out the dream that
So I disagree, but before I speak, then let Sophie speak.
Just it's very brief. Sorry. But you mentioned Derek Jensen earlier. We've been talking to him for a while, and Hugh has interviewed him a couple of years ago too. And we followed Deep Green Resistance and what they do quite a lot. And you see, he said one day that he pledged his allegiance to the natural world against the system. And I think we're a little bit in that place. Our group is mostly, we're all environmentalist in a special way, not maybe not what you would imagine, but the and everything that you're talking about, presuming that people can live in a parallel world and continue to grow their veg and live close to nature, you presume that the climate and that nature will be intact, will be able to provide. But we're in an emergency there that is maybe not going to enable that to happen. So that's why that's where we are, where Derek is saying, well, F the system, first nature first, and humans first also, but not, that's where Hugh would express it much better than me.
No, I do hear what you're saying. And honestly, it's a beautiful sentiment. I mean, my respect for Jensen's work is very high, even if I think that, not unlike the Marxist, his conclusions are perhaps misguided, or at least they're not going to succeed. But, it doesn't change the fact that his critique of the system is brilliant. And I think his passion for nature and his knowledge of the natural world really comes out in his writing in a beautiful way. So, my disagreement with his conclusions, his sort of radical conclusions, doesn't preclude my appreciation for his work. But because of my disagreement with those radical conclusions, and in particular, my skepticism as to whether or not large swaths of the natural world will survive the coming centuries of impacts and degradation, also keeps me from, I guess, taking that radical point of view. Doomsday scenarios are as commonplace as dreams of gods, right? It's always been so. Not, and mainly because doomsday is possible. It's happened continuously throughout the Earth's history, right? I mean, you look through the fossil record and you see massive extinction events. You look at the present climate, you see the climatic shifts. The explanations, in my mind, are still up for debate, but undoubtedly, habitat loss, extinction of animals, that is occurring at a rapid clip. And to the extent that that can be stopped, Godspeed to you all. But on the whole, the idea that the Earth is destined to become some barren, dune-like wasteland in the near future is possible. It's possible that dragons will emerge from the sea. I don't know whether it will happen. The indications are
dragons. In fact, they could emerge from the sea very shortly. In fact,
but
the methane dragon is right.
No, I'm sorry. I missed the first part of the what?
You said dragons could emerge from the sea. I say,
the
methane dragon.
Yeah. With gene editing being what it is, it may not be that long before dragons emerge from the sea. But I guess, to me, any culture that rides on a very strong kind of doomsday scenario is destined, unless that doomsday is in fact imminent, which they tend not to be. Any culture that rides on a doomsday scenario is bound to make radical missteps. I grew up in a culture which foresaw imminent planetary doom, right? Southern Baptist culture, pre-millennium, the signs were in the sky. It was clear what was happening to everybody around me, right? Now, I didn't buy into it wholeheartedly as I grew older anyway. As a kid, obviously, you just believe what you're told. But as I became a teenager, I doubted it very much. But that sort of imagery has seeped into me, just like it seeped into countless hundreds of millions or billions of people all over the planet, right? It's not an unhealthy idea to think that human beings or, natural forces or the gods even could completely come in and destroy everything and fuck everything up. It could happen. And anything that we can do to avoid that is positive. But the cultures that I grew up in were so deluded that, the kinds of decisions people made in the lead up to these, figments in their imaginations were so retarded that it was very sobering for me. So that whenever I hear, even these data-backed and empirical observations of climatic degradation, when it culminates in this doomsday scenario, I immediately recoil. I suppose the Great Freeze was supposed to have occurred, according to the predictions of the '60s, and obviously that didn't pan out.
Well,
These sorts of things, these big picture sorts of scenarios, don't really, even if they appeal to my imagination, they don't appeal to my intellect, because I've seen how fucking idiotic the decisions that are made on the basis of imminent doom can be. Another instance, if I could add, are you familiar with a small cult called Zindic Farm? Have you ever heard of them?
No.
So Zindic Farm was one of
me.
They're not quite as famous as The Farm. You're familiar with The Farm in Middle Tennessee?
Yeah, the farm. Yeah.
Yeah, so they were formed at around.
Farm.
Yeah, so the Zindic Farm was formed around the same time, far more radical than The Farm. They skirted just to the edge of eco-terrorist sort of rhetoric, but they never crossed over really, or maybe they did, and I just chose not to hear it. But I went and lived with him for quite some time. When I first reached adulthood, I hitchhiked down and stayed on this commune, and it was probably next to growing up around anarchic rednecks, probably the most eye-opening experience of my life. It's never left me, because they were absolutely right in their conclusion that the broad mainstream American culture is utterly unhealthy. And they were absolutely right that new ways of life have to be arrived at in order to survive all of the negative impacts of this broad sort of herd-like culture. But on everything else, including their predictions of imminent doom, including their idea that, let's just say, the immune system is always going to be strong enough to take care of STDs, including the idea that their leader had all the answers, no matter what. Again, fucking idiotic. It just didn't pan out. They got a ton of pussy and dick. They built super cool buildings. They grew really tasty vegetables. But eventually they had to disband after the leaders died. And, their dreams they literally had these insane, egomaniacal ideas that they were going to be able to reach the pinnacle of power and change the world through sort of aggressive measures, whatever. The sorts of fantasies that a lot of LSD will tend to induce. But, it never fucking happened, right? And so many things never fucking happened. The Capitol riots occurred because they thought that the army would swoop in and take care of all of the evil people who do exist to some extent, and clear the way for and clear the way for a society of freedom. Well, instead of that happening, now people like me are seen apparently as fucking potential, whatever. We won't even use the word, at least in this context. And there are a ton of people in fucking prison, and they may not be out for decades. And did it have a positive impact? I don't know. Maybe later historians will look back on that moment and say, yeah, that really worked out for the best. Ultimately, the sort of cultural dominoes fell in the favor of those who set that in motion. But again, whenever doomsday scenarios are invoked as a justification for action, in my experience and in my research, it doesn't seem to work out too hot. That's my take on that.
So no, it doesn't. But here, they're necessary for a cult. So if a Southern Baptist ideology, it comes from basic Christianity, and Christianity's roots are a doomsday cult. Jesus was a doomsday prophet. And so you can't really do a cult, as far as I know, without saying that it has to be kind of binary. You have to say life is at stake, and if we don't act, doom. And so everybody is forced into that. A cult has to say that. So it's just a device, right? You see, the thing is, you can't take it too intellectually. It's not highbrow. You're trying to get people visceral. So the whole point is that we're trying to head off. We have a goal, and that's to like head off transhumanism and all these guys. So the thing that I don't agree with you is that we can't do anything about it. If people want to be cyborgs and transhumans, then we can't do anything. I say no. Especially as a writer, you've got a tremendous thing to offer, because what people are being taken for a ride based on a narrative. And so the transhuman and technocratic narrative is that we have the singularity of the nerds, and we have the rapture of the nerds, and soon AI fixes all our problems. It's all batshit crazy. It's as mad as anything you can come up with in any cult you've had. It is a cult.
I would agree.
So you just do a counter cult. You do a counterculture counter cult, and so you just have a different narrative. Now it's very easy for us because we're all about Team Human. We're saying we're protecting life and humanity, and these guys are necromancers. They want death. Machines are dead. Virtual worlds are dead. E-currencies, everything is dead. It's boring. It's like a mausoleum. It's predictable. It's just tedium. So they haven't got a good story. It's like, once you've got over your 12-year-old Star Trek fantasy, then you say, well, space is as boring as all fuck. No one wants to live on Mars. You're going to go, you follow Elon Musk to Mars and stuff. You know how shit it is? If you didn't like lockdown, well, try having lockdown in a barrel, on a hyperbaric barrel with 2 feet of lead to protect you from solar flares. Mars is not a fucking fun place. So stop jerking off. Elon Musk goes, SpaceX and stuff. It's like, yeah, it's all great with the blast off, and then they drop you on Mars. Bye, have a nice time, enjoy your video games. But that's you're living in a hyperbaric chamber. You might as well be under the sea. And so the reality sucks balls. And so it's just so damned easy for us to say we're all about unpredictability. We're all about chaos. And they're all about order, regimentation, predictability. The sterile world is, where no one gets sick and stuff. It's like, I would even have my kids get sick if it means that, well, they still have an exciting life. They have risk. They have possibility. They have things that they can't expect. And they have romance and adventure and stuff that, So it's exactly the thing that is you're saying, look, we're heading for an apocalypse if we go that way. But the other way is unknown adventure and stuff. And we absolutely win the narrative. It's just so damned attractive, right? So you just basically build a secret society. You basically raid all the things that, the psychology that is the psychology of a psyops. And so, that's all we're doing. We're not really going Uncle Ted or anything. It might turn that way, but you always have the option.
Hey,
people are so into it.
I don't want to know a fucking thing about it if you guys are going to go Ted. Delete.
Well, nobody would. Nobody plans to go Uncle Ted. You see, where that would happen is if things go badly wrong. You see, if things went into some really dark. Let me ask you something.
Actually, 2 things. One, my battery is about to go dead. So I'm going to either have to work out that technical issue real quick, or cut it short. Now we'll have to cut it off, but let me ask you something real quick. Are you guys talking about Uncle Ted shit on YouTube? Because that's a really, really bad fucking idea.
We just talk about it in a very elliptical way. So no more than GDR and Eric Jensen and those two. So we basically, our security culture is that you have to, whatever you say, whatever you write or whatever you say, it must be publishable. There must be no secrets and stuff. So whatever I write, I make sure that I would be happy to have it read back to me by a prosecuting attorney on the stand. So,
okay.
So
fair enough then.
If I would be quite happy if a jury saw this video. Yeah. If a jury saw this video, if I was being prosecuted in some dystopian future for some hellish crime that they did in retrospect or something, is like, I'd be quite happy for this to be, and everything we do is that way. Yeah. So
but nobody can be. Give me just 1 moment. I'm going to work out this power issue, and I will be right back.
Okay. Should we wait or should we do another one? Oh, okay.
I think he said he's
anyway.
coming
So,
right.
so anyway, we're like,
Yeah.
And
Okay.
I mean,
oh, that
right
quick!
back.
Wow, wow, that was quick.
That was fun.
So basically, yeah. So now, if the band just plays up, does the band want to come in, or should we go to commercial break? What should we do now? Commercial break. Let's go to commercial break. Do you want to do Steve Bannon? You can do an impression of Steve Bannon, basically recruiting for QAnon.
No, you do it.
Sophie?
No, you.
Steve Bannon impression? I couldn't do a Steve Bannon impression.
Next time I have my guitar.
Steve Bannon.
Steve Bannon.
Yeah. God, I can do a Mr. Bean impression.
I can hear a lot of noise behind Joe. Is he in a van or something? Because you can hear traffic or something. It looks like he's in a. Are you in a van? Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Okay.
Signal, not noise. Signal, not noise. That's Steve Bannon. By the way, Steve Bannon is a fucking hero. I don't care what anybody says.
Hey, you can't say that on our neck of the woods. We have a left-wing audience. But anyway, the whole
look, as far as that goes, I've seen Steve Bannon reach out to people like Tim Pool. I've seen Steve Bannon reach out, reached out in a huge way with Errol Morris. I've seen Steve Bannon interviewed with Lester Holt. I see Steve Bannon bringing on Naomi Wolf, who is still. You might want to cut this, but she's still gorgeous, man. I think she's married, so I think she's already occupied. But at any rate, I'm not just saying this because of a contractual obligation, but that guy is fucking completely open-minded compared to almost any other personality, who claims to be about, going across the aisle and all that sort of shit. So, yeah. Anyway, but
don't you see a movement? Don't you see a change? More and more people are going across the aisle. If you see like Jordan Peterson and stuff, he's been talking to Stephen Fry and all these, and we've been doing it too. We were talking to a guy. I can't say his name because it'll get dinged. I got a ban from YouTube.
I'm still in touch with him. I'm still in touch with him.
Yeah, but anyway, he's in this movement called Drastic, and it was Drastic that broke all the story that led to the Wuhan lab leak and Senator Ron Paul and stuff. As the Rand Paul and those hearings that are going on now, they came from him. So while we were talking on a weekly basis to him, he suddenly shot into the limelight and got famous, and so it was an amazing kind of journey. But it was, I have to say, it's really difficult to talk to guys on the far right, and we have been. But I'll tell you what the stumbling block is religion. Well, it's a stumbling block for me. Is they all the way perfect down the line, Great Reset, full marks. It often gets a little rocky around climate change, and then often climate denies. And then, so on the left, climate denial is absolutely, religion. I mean, climate crisis is for truth, but then you get to this thing is they against transhumanism because they're Christians, and I'm like, ooh, do you have to do that? It's like, just so close, It's like, why did you?
Look, man,
it's fun for me the spiritual thing and stuff, but Christian, I mean, the spirituality and Team Human and all of that, it's fine. But just, we need to stop Klaus Schwab for Jesus. It's like, oh no, you were just sounding coherent. And then
these are ancient,
just kind of like skid it off, like you lose everybody.
These are ancient anchors, right? Like they're not going away. I don't think. I mean, I think that's actually. I would argue that the sort of psychological stability, and by psychological stability, I mean cultural stability over time, that Christianity especially, I almost said it especially Judaism, Hinduism, to some extent, the more shamanistic sort of tribal religious cultures that are very, very widespread in, say, Shinto. These are extraordinarily ancient and durable ways of thinking of the world. Now, do they reflect accurately the metaphysical reality of the world? I mean, we could debate that all day. We could pick or choose. We could put them against each other, whatever. I think is fairly undebatable is that these ancient anchors that have held down human societies and cultural norms and have, mediated our interaction with the natural world and with each other, they're not going anywhere. And I don't think that they necessarily should. I get all kinds of flack from Christians all the time, from all sorts of different branches, all of whom are pissed off that I don't fit into their particular metaphysical model of what the world should look like, what morality should look like, and even like what the fucking words I say should sound like. But, the idea of them scooping me up and burning me at the stake one day is, crossed my mind more than once. But as opposed to what, right? Like you show up at a Native American gathering and you touch the wrong piece to the end of the corn, and the next thing you know, they fucking scalped you. I mean, there is no culture that doesn't have some sense of the sacred, that once it's trampled on, you're now a heretic and you're fair game. So as bad as that sucks, being, an advanced primate on planet Earth, I forgive Christians for their particularities.
Yeah, no, you see, what I'm lamenting, I'm absolutely with you just basically the value of religion and stuff like that to people, and the value of the institution. What I'm lamenting is the fact that you lose the audience. They're basically going out there to try and recruit people against this transhumanism. And then you say, why? And it's because of my little niche thing that nobody damn well cares about. And you lose the audience. And it's like, can't you just say, oh, we're doing it because people need to be spiritual and it's a human thing? For example, I have Christianity and other people need their religions respected, and transhumanisms don't respect spirit. That would be fine. But it's not. It's for Jesus, and it's like, wow, why bring Jesus into it?
Look, I myself, while I certainly wouldn't consider myself to be an Orthodox Christian in any sense, I do spend a lot of time in Orthodox churches and in Catholic churches. And while obviously I'm not consecrated enough to, approach the altar, so to speak, it's impossible for me to get around the sort of health, and by health I mean in a very natural sense, the health of these communities. And again, Jesus is the icon that I hold in my head and heart as the highest icon, kind of a henotheistic thing for my own reasons. But as a kind of hippy dippy sort of individual, ultimately, it doesn't preclude Buddha, or even to some extent, say, maybe I'm going out on a limb here, but say somebody like Marx. I mean, Marx had his passion, he had his points. Certainly Darwin. I mean, Jesus does not preclude Darwin's observations, at least for me. But anyway, yeah, I know, I hear you, man. Any kind of closed-minded circuit, or any kind of this limited mentality and limited justifications for any kind of worldly action, it gets on your nerves. But you've been around the world. You're around the world now. I mean, the world is full of fucking wild beliefs that people are constantly trying to push. So it takes all kinds.
That's the insight. Yeah, well, but that's the insight. Is it takes all kinds, and basically, we need the diversity. And coming to Greece, I really saw a different aspect to religion, because I started to see the aspects of social cohesion and stuff. So I kind of like the Greek Orthodox Church, because the Greeks are pagan. They're pagan as all hell. Christianity is it's a very glistening veneer, but it's a very thin veneer, and you just scratch the surface and you find they're all like Hellenistic pagans underneath.
Yeah, and
Yeah, it's the same in Ireland. It's like, oh, it's all fierce
it's
Catholicism and stuff. You scratch the thing and they're all bloody pagan, right?
All the fairies, all the holy places, all the sacred circles, trees and bushes, and it's 90% pagan. There's still people going to the wells.
But it's the same in Greece. It's evil eyes and spirits and everything. Every damn altar has got a pagan thing. So you'll have a little altar at the side of the road and a little shrine, and there's somebody in it, and it's saying whatchamacallit or whatever, and but it's all hiding a pagan thing that's 3,000 years old, and it's just like, okay, to satisfy the church, we'll put a candle in front of it. but I can see the value, because it's the cohesion, the meaning to life, Greek wedding is filled with these superstitions and shit, but it binds the people. They have, I worry about America.
But it also connects them to nature.
There's no social cohesion, and it's because of the liberal democracy.
These old shrines and these old places that are thousands and thousands of years old, that are pre-Christian, are the only connection that they have with the reality of nature. Water, trees, places, rocks, they are their reality, and they've superimposed on this a religion that is coming from a book that has very little into reality. It's the pagan rites, rituals, and the pagan traditions and names are totally connected with our earth. You see,
yes, and the transhuman thing is a monoculture. It's basically you only allowed a very narrow set of ideas. The Overton window is a thin slice about this big. Everything else is cancelled and banned, and it's all authoritarian. So there's no tolerance, there's no diversity. It's a monoculture that's very vulnerable, even down to the genetic level. If you can have designer babies, you can bet everybody will have such a monoculture of designer babies. They'll all be the same, to the point that they're all like Irish potatoes and vulnerable to the same devastating pandemic. So I think it's terribly dangerous what they're doing.
Undoubtedly, to the extent that it can be realized. I mean, at the moment, transhumanism is this tiny ideological core with massive cultural resonances with their ideas, right? I don't know that I've ever heard Klaus Schwab, for instance, or if you all know Harari has said transhumanism, he's certainly never identified as a transhuman. I'm sorry, as a transhumanist. But it's amazing to me how you do have this ideological core of transhumanists who have for a long time now predicted the kind of culture that we're living in now, and certainly predicted the culture that we're hurtling towards. But yet it's sort of like, I don't know, like a psychedelic culture, right? Like, how many hippies in the 60s wore tie-dye? How many of them dropped acid every day? Undoubtedly, the reason people wore tie-dye is because a lot of people on acid thought it looked cool and trippy to their visual effects.
I don't know.
Well, who's this? Was that you?
It's Mike. Mike?
Sorry about that.
Maybe he's not at work.
Excuse me. Please excuse me.
Hey, at any rate, Sophie, your observation about the pagan connection to the natural world and the tension created by the biblical narrative with that, it's tragic to say the least. But the notion that the Bible is just a pure fantasy, I get it, right? You read Genesis, you read the miracles, all of that, nobody's ever seen that, so people don't believe it. But take away the sort of literalism and look at it as a piece of literature, I think that the Bible is a deep encapsulation of realities, ancient realities, and still quite relevant to the present time. Maybe not for everyone.
Oh yeah, don't doubt that. Yeah, no, I mean it's got to be one of the most important books in the world. Still, I mean it's the biggest seller still, right? It's the best, still the biggest bestseller. I think so. Yeah, okay. Maybe the Quran is, but you see, Islam, they have quite a number of books outside the Quran and stuff. So yeah, it's no, I think it is. I mean, at least 2 billion Catholics alone, and I guess they all got Bibles. But no, it's still, yeah, it's a very, very important book. I mean, if you put Origin of the Species next to the Bible, I think it's, Origin of the Species is sold 0.0001% of the Bible.
Well, and also if you look at the concentrated wisdom on the Origin, it really, the difference is just stark, right? As you read through the Bible, again, let's just say you ignore a literal interpretation of any of it. Let's just say that you go with the theory that it's all made up. Even if it is all made up, it's made up of extraordinarily insightful observations about human culture, even human evolution, from the most basic hunter-gatherer bands to the first large-scale tribes to the first agricultural civilizations, to the sorts of dramas of the empire and all of that. You're talking about an extraordinarily insightful piece of literature, if nothing else. It's really unfortunate, I guess, the number of, obnoxious Christians, we'll put it mildly, who have inoculated so many other people to the gospel. Because I personally find it to be, I think Dostoevsky called it the most beautiful story on earth, and I don't think he's wrong.
Yeah, well, it raids psychological archetypes. So I think the story of Jesus, the reason why it's so attractive is it's narcissistic. It's basically the story of every man. Hidden in his story is our psychological study. You struggle through life, and so it epitomizes us. So when people, it comes to the fore when people have a psychotic episodes and stuff. They go like, "I'm Jesus," and what they're saying is, I finally got it. I see my whole life clearly, and it is Jesus's life. And you say, yeah, sure it is, because they made it that way because Jesus is the archetypal every man's life. So not surprisingly, you're Jesus because they invented it that way. So it's very deep from that point of view. I think it's dangerous. The Old Testament is dangerous, and that, you see, I think we're in trouble with the Old Testament, and the reason is from Genesis, because of all this stuff about dominion over the earth and the animals and stuff. It gave us this very simplistic view of the supremacy of man and basically a justification from the super being. I think that's a big problematic thing there, because it means that we've been very bad stewards of the earth. It would be much better if they just said, like, hey, you're a chimp. You get over it.
You'll notice, though, that for instance, the Chinese killed off all their elephants very early on in their history, and have created a vast monoculture of their ecological systems long before Christianity ever got there. You'll also notice that, in the stories that, at least by many people's interpretation of, say, the Anasazi Indians, or the Aztecs and Mayans, that it didn't require the book of Genesis for the greed of human beings to outstrip their ecological environment.
And Easter Island. We have talked about this in our group a lot. We don't only identify the writings of any religion as the only culprit in the disconnection between man and nature and his proper place in the creation. We talk about a part of the brain that has evolved to create this sort of behavior. But there is an enormous contrast between the place of man in the Bible and the place of man in the old tales that I know of, whether they are, you know, of the Icelanders or of the Irish or of the old European tales. And the place of nature was certainly much more important. I mean, man was not disconnected, as he is in the Bible, where he's a centerpiece.
Yeah, I think the hunter-gatherers and stuff were...
We could argue as to how disconnected the Bible is from the natural world. No need to go that. Let's just say that look at the book of Job and its descriptions of man's place in nature. If you take away the role, the kind of cartoonish element of Yahweh in the story, and you look at man's place in nature according to the book of Job, I think you find something a little closer to the Taoist or certainly the Celtic pagan conception. It's not as literarily rich, and certainly as far as the natural world goes, it doesn't come close to Hinduism, right? I mean, you look at the Vedas, particularly the Mahabharata, and you know, its descriptions of natural phenomena and the animals and the zoomorphism and the anthropomorphism is so vivid that, you know, it's clear that these were people who had far more appreciation for nature, at least in a literary sense, than the early Hebrews.
Appreciation for nature that I'm talking about is human-centeredness. Human-centeredness.
Sure.
You know, and that is the big divide I see, you see.
And I don't think I would disagree with you. I do think that there is embedded in the narrative of Genesis, obviously humans are at the center of all of this, right? Now, I would say that the Hindu mythology is the same in the sense that anthropocentrism is key. Certainly Hinduism. I'm sorry, certainly Buddhism. I mean, you know, in Buddhism, the human state, even with its very elaborate mapping of the animal world and the hungry ghosts and the heavens and the hells, the human state is seen as the only possible state in which one can obtain enlightenment. So it's this sort of anthropocentrism is a prominent characteristic of the Judeo-Christian narrative, but I think that the uniqueness of that is perhaps overstated, not necessarily by you, but by many critics of that narrative. At the same time, your point that the Celtic, European pagan tales are fundamentally different in the human orientation of the natural environment, I would agree with you there, and I think there is something dramatically healthy and realistic about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reason why the Vedas are the same as the Mahabharata and that is the same as the religions of the book is I think they came from the same origin. They came from the Proto-Indo-Europeans. So you have to call them Proto-Indo-Europeans now, thanks to the Nazis. But basically what they really are is Aryans.
You just have
but
to,
you're not allowed to call them Aryans anymore because they say
if you pronounce it Aryan,
Indo-Iranians or any damn thing other than Aryans, but they don't, you know, scholars jump through hoops to avoid Aryan. But they're Aryans, and the Mahabharata, the Bhagavad Gita, the Old Testament, it's from the same damn people. It's Aryans.
Well, if you pronounce it Aryan, it takes away some of the sting. Don't give it that hard A.
Yeah, but
Aryan.
The transhuman.
So it is right to say that, you know, like the Armenians, that R sound is what they called themselves, and so the Armenians are part of them, and that, and I believe that even the Egyptians, the Ra, is from that R. It's actually RR, so they would say RR was the sun. And but anyway, R is of noble birth, right? Of noble birth.
Transhumanism has its roots in this human-centeredness, and as it roots in those religions, it's
Aryan culture. In Aryan culture,
it's totally irrelevant to any shamanic or any nature-based worship going back 10,000 years, because people wouldn't even have this concept. Transhumanism is rooted in human disconnection with nature.
Absolutely, but The reason
I
is
I
they were
disagree
first
completely.
agriculturalists.
I disagree completely. Look at the Chinese Taoist goal of creating an immortal being, or to become an immortal being through alchemy. Look at the more now again, this is an Indo-Iranian tradition, but look at the yogic practices and the idea of perfecting the human physical form and then cultivating all of these magical powers. All of these different cultures, yes, transhumanism, as we call it, transhumanism, right, as a term, comes out of the West, comes out, I believe it was Julian Huxley who coined it, but as a concept, as a broader concept, this notion that technology or human technique can perfect the human form and perhaps create some sort of immortal state. This is something that is drawing on all of these different ancient civilizational forms. So it's not, it came out of the West. It's certainly not unique to the West. It may lack the humility of the Celts.
So, yep, but it is the same people. It is the Aryans. So if you go back,
if I could add one more thing about this notion that transhumanism is somehow detached from nature. It is in many ways. Obviously, putting fucking chips in your head and cutting your arm off to create a bionic arm is pretty fucking unnatural. At the same time, if you look at some of the heaviest thinkers that they may not identify as transhumanists, but they're certainly on that bent, someone like Kevin Kelly, right, the Whole Earth Catalog guy, the Wired magazine, either editor or certainly long-term contributor for a decade and a half plus. Kevin Kelly describes this, and others do, Max Tegmark, others, he describes this progression into a hyper-technologized, to use a clunky term, hyper-technologized state of being for human beings, and this sort of unification of the entire planet in this cybernetic, interconnected neo-universe. He sees this as just the natural extension of the natural world into human life, and we're sort of this screen through which nature is filtering its primal drives to become the most possible interconnected and complex conscious being it can become. So it's not man against nature in this conception. It's man as the ultimate expression of nature, and technology as being the next step in that ultimate expression and ultimately replacing human beings. It's, in fact, transhumanism, at least the post-human version of it, is profoundly anti-anthropocentric. It's very much about self-sacrifice in order for this higher being to rise up. I'm reminded of like Kenneth Anger's Lucifer Rising, those early scenes with the volcanoes and the Egyptians. Anyway.
But but it's progressive. So it's like Ken Wilber, and from like dust to deity. Yeah. So it's this progressive idea that there's this evolution to Godhead. So it's to Homo Deus, as Harari says. But so this is a very old idea, but it's an Aryan idea, and the proof of it is if you have a look in Hindu philosophy, you have the concept of a yantra. A yantra is a machine. The very first mention of machine comes from the Aryans, and the machine was basically this vehicle for self-transformation. So they said that you create the machine, and the machine is how we get to Godhead. And so it's a pure Aryan ideal. But here's the problem. It's been known since the year dot to be pure hubris. So it's been known to be the death of anybody that tries to go down that path. So the very first work of literature is Iranian. It's the Epic of Gilgamesh. And the story of Gilgamesh is exactly this. It's basically how he seeks immortality through human ingenuity. And he fails miserably, and the salvation is to understand that no, you're mortal, it's better that way, and you just learn to accept it and integrate yourself with nature. And I think that's the thing that'll kill us is our immortality drive, and that's what's going to kill all these guys that are on this transhuman trip. They're on the forbidden trip to immortality.
Well, I don't anticipate they're going to succeed anytime soon. So, honestly,
no, they're going to kill us all. They're going to kill us all trying to get there.
They may take a few. Hopefully, not me. And hopefully not you. Now that I know you, I'm fundamentally invested in you not, getting chipped against your will or turned into Soylent Green, or God forbid, picked up by Interpol or something for something you said on YouTube. Be careful what you fucking.
They already chipped me. They already chipped me. Get out! Get out! Get out! Sorry, I slipped into the wrong movie.
I do.
I think
yeah, please go ahead.
If you turn your flash photography, I start saying "get out" a lot.
But I think what you said, Hugh, in previous interviews about the format of our long conversation makes us much less danger because of the dilution of little words in long conversations instead of short little, videos.
It only takes one ping.
Yeah. But you are the first one who mentioned this. You are the first one who mentioned TK in the conversation. We said Uncle.
Well, you can't. You can't talk about Lud. You can't talk about Luddism, or I'm a failed Luddite. Obviously, I mean, look at me. But you can't talk about the problems that at least techno-skepticism creates without bringing up old Teddy. He's an albatross around our necks.
Yeah,
he's the Osama bin Laden of Luddism.
Yeah, but you can weave that out of the story. It's an advanced grade to get into that level. But anyway, we should possibly end it there. It's been wonderful to meet you, and I would like to do it again. I would really like it if you read through that document more and had a look at Bright Axiom and those guys that did, and try get the idea of how you can have a secret society. That's really kind of a joke in a way, but it's kind of Discordian, and it's kind of countercultural, and it's a way of making people think of an alternative to this dry story.
I think I'll definitely have a look at it. It looks interesting. I think Sophie may have already hit upon the solution, even if you do fear the incursion of the drones. Oh, you said you have a garden on an island in Ireland.
Well, yes. Well, I'm not on an island anymore, but I'm on a peninsula. But I mean, I'm tributary to warming, to all sorts of other conditions that my survival could be suddenly compromised by changes in temperatures and all sorts of things that might come from the tech industry. So it's all connected. It's all connected. Nothing is perfect.
Well, keep the walls up. Keep the walls high.
Yeah, and you too. And good luck for everything you're doing. And thank you for your writings. And hopefully we might meet again. We will probably.
Well,
we'll post.
Hopefully, it won't be in some sort of Matrix-like environment.
We are. Look at us. We're sitting here.
Oh my God!
In Matrix right now.
We're here. It's true, though. It's true.
But that's what I say is you got to fight it from within, man.
I never. The first time I ever did Zoom was, maybe 6 or 7 months into the pandemic. The third time or fourth time I ever did a video kind of conferencing, it was on live television. And I would say that at this point, this is maybe 15 or so times that I've ever done this. Like I've been so averse to this entire fucking trend. I've managed to avoid it, and hopefully I'll drop out of it as soon as I possibly can. But it is a very weird mode of consciousness, isn't it?
It's disgusting. It's obscene. But we must put you in touch with Mark Boyle.
Yeah.
As well.
If I can get your email off you, and I will send you
Sure.
links to Mark Boyle's works. He's a local. He's an Irish guy. He's a guy who lives off grid, and he doesn't have any tech at all. No phone, no nothing. So, but he's written a few good books, and I will.
He lived. He lived for about 10 years with no money, right?
No. He lived a year without money.
He's known as the no money guy.
Moneyless man. But he only did a year without the money, and then with the money he bought a little farm place, and he built his cabin. And now he's been 4 years without tech and electricity, phone, car, nothing, no running water. But it's a long story, and yeah.
But I beat him. I've been 2 years without money now.
I just got a letter.
I beat him then. I've been 2 years without money.
He uses the post, and that's the only way. I just got a letter from him, and I still can't manage to get him online, but he does sometimes interviews, so I'm not giving up on the idea of inviting him. So we'll see. We'll see.
Well, maybe you can track him down in person, huh?
Oh, I've been to his place a couple of times.
There you go. I missed that part of the story. Okay, well there you go. You don't need to drag him into this god awful medium. Sounds like he's doing all right.
Yeah, he keeps away. He has other. Well, you see, when you have to do every day, go and fetch your water at the well, when you have to cut your wood, when you have to go and fish get your meal in the lake, when you have your day is spent and slowly, without distractions, but you still have a physical investment in everyday living that is, enormous. And then you're tired because you go to bed like the hens, and you wake up early, and you just don't have any time to spend really. He does a lot of contemplation. He does a lot of like what I do, really, sitting out and admiring the beauty where we live. But yeah, I haven't given up on going to visit him with a laptop and trying to get him out of his compound where he doesn't want any electronics in the compound. But
good for him.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's the rules. There's no mobiles either on the place. He has
like heaven.
Yeah, he has an old pig barn that he's refurbished to make it into a free hostel where it's not advertised, but people can go, and it's called a Happy Pig. And people go in there and stay for nothing, and they go and weed the garden, or they help him to cut wood, or just bring something, and in exchange, and you can stay there as long as you like. So he has a contact with the outside world, which is a real contact, which is people, and yeah. So
that's wonderful.
I'd say you'd like him.
Sophie, how do you say goodbye in the Celtic tongue?
I don't know, because I don't have Irish, so I don't. I'm originally French, and so I didn't have.
Well, the French were Celts too. You should surely have some sort of
so
resonance.
We say slán, and that's usually the way we say hello and we say goodbye here in Ireland. Slán.
Slán. Okay, well, in that case, slán, Sophie. Namaste, Lord Hugh.
So just one question I have to ask before you go is are you related to Dave Allen at all?
No. Now, for reasons.
So, yeah, I mean, the arch technocrat.
For complicated reasons, I'm not related to many Allens directly.
Just checking. Okay, well, it's been wonderful to meet up with you. It's very nice to make contact, so we must keep in touch. It's very, very good to have you on.
It's been fascinating. You can cut out any of that Ted Kazinsky stuff. I don't need that kind of rap. But but it's all in your court. I've said nothing that I'm ashamed of. That's for damn sure. So hey, namaste, both of you.
Thank you.
Very
Bye
good
bye.
speech.
Namaste.
Bye bye.
Namaste.
Oh, sorry about that. I did a